Donnie Darko 2001, the original cinema cut. It's a cult movie of considerable reputation, and I think it is mostly earned. I think it's a movie that perhaps needs more than one viewing to really appreciate it. It reminds me a wee bit of Fight Club, which I wasn't sure if I liked it or disliked it when I first saw it, and it then became possibly my favourite movie of all time. Donnie Darko, I read about in a magazine or several magazines and was really enthusiastic about it, and when I eventually got to see it, I was actually rather disappointed. I didn't think it lived up to the hype. In the UK, when it was released, it was instantly appreciated and was a cult hit immediately. There was no delay, unlike America, where it took a while to catch on. I didn't really like it that much, I was disappointed, but you revisit it, you watch it again, and you go, oh, actually, that's quite interesting. It improves when you watch it again. So, I don't know, at this point in time, I may have seen the movie, say, for argument's sake, 6, 7 times at most, and I think it is a good movie. There is a lot to like about it. Some of it's actually very strong. It's got lots of cool, interesting scenes, really interesting use of 80s music. Some of the dialogue exchanges are really good. The stuff with the family is also really good. There's a lot of really good stuff in it. My problem really comes from the climax, in which in this review we'll have spoilers. I think the climax pretty much negates everything we've just seen. We've been watching the movie for about 100 minutes or more, and the ending basically says all that you have just seen is ultimately irrelevant because the movie loops back to the start and the events we have just seen will no longer happen because of some very poorly explained time travel. It's very ambiguous as to how he gets put back 28 days or whatever it is to the start of the story. It's not explained, it's very up in the air. It's irrelevant, it's kind of David Lynchian non-logic, but if you do actually stop to think about exactly how did he get back in time, and it's really not actually explained or explored. As far as I can tell, the movie really just skips that part as to how he time travels. Anyway, by sacrificing himself, essentially his girlfriend doesn't die and he doesn't shoot Frank in the eye. But if all that stuff doesn't happen, it's just, I don't feel like it's a satisfying ending. I do feel as though you sit there at the end and you go, okay, but what was the point of the story? I would actually kind of say that the movie is badly structured. Now, the movie works. I am not saying it is a badly structured film because it does work, it holds together. It's not like it's poorly written. But if you stop and think about it, why does anything in the movie happen? What I mean by that most specifically is, why do certain scenes happen? If that scene was deleted or replaced with other content instead, would it affect the overall story? And I think the answer is no. In almost every single scene, every scene could be removed or heavily altered and changed. Why do they flood the school? How is that relevant to the plot? If that whole entire flooding sequence was removed, would it affect the film? Would it affect the story? Really, it wouldn't. The story would still make every bit as much sense as it does. If you were to remove the Patrick Swayze character and his activities that are uncovered, if you were to remove that whole thing and his video workshops, again, would it affect the story? Would what happens to Donnie Darko be different? No. Why does Frank specifically get shot in the eye? No particular reason. Why does the girlfriend get run over by a car? Again, no specific reason. Why is Frank wearing a bunny suit? Could he be wearing a totally different costume? Yes, he could. It's not essential to the plot. So I'm just saying that the structure's not necessarily super tight. It's not really a good sign when you can completely remove things and it wouldn't make any difference. So the movie is verging on the completely random, one random scene after the other. Now they happen to be good scenes individually, in and of themselves. They are interesting. The Patrick Swayze character is very interesting. The bunny rabbit costume is interesting. I would argue the actual car crash sequence at the end with the, well, car crash is not quite the right word, but anyway, the running over of the girlfriend and then the getting shot in the eye, that's rather silly. Those bits could have been changed with something else, something maybe better. Anyway, overall, what I'm trying to say is that the movie is a wee bit on the random side. A lot of the events that happen in the movie are just cool scenes rather than actually a well-structured story. And I do feel that you could almost call it a celebrated climax. It's not necessarily that famous and well celebrated a climax, but it's considered to be, you know, an interesting enigma, a confusing movie, a total headfuck. And I just feel the ending, if I understand it, which is basically that he goes back in time to save his girlfriend and Frank by sacrificing himself via some very underexplained time travel. To me, it doesn't feel like it's a maybe the girlfriend and Frank are underdeveloped characters. Maybe the events which lead to their deaths, the car accident, isn't very satisfying, isn't very well explained. It's a slightly silly scene, and it just makes me feel that Donnie Darko sacrificing himself, he dies so that these people can live, doesn't feel very satisfying. I don't care enough about those characters. They are not well enough developed, and you've got these like 27 days or something between when he could sacrifice himself and the car accident. So you've got these like 27 days with the Patrick Swayze situation and the flooding of the school and whatever else, and Sparkle Motion going to the tournament. It's a feeling of those 27 minutes as a story could just be totally removed, and the movie could be, oh, he survives the accident with the plane part falling on his house, and then the next day the car accident happens and then he goes back in time. What I'm just saying is that the movie flirts quite heavily with pointlessness. It's a slightly pointless story. Why do certain things happen? The answer is because if these things don't happen, then there isn't enough running time to make a feature-length movie. It's not that bad. I'm being quite harsh. I'll try to really simplify it. The scenes of what happens in the movie are fairly random, and a lot of the content could be removed or replaced with other content, and it wouldn't really affect the overall story. And that is, to a certain extent, an example of bad structure. The script and the overall story, I think the overall story is slightly pointless. There's a cool idea in there, and it's well written. The characters are good for the most part. Most of the characters are good, and the dialogue is good, and the events are good. It's all interesting stuff, but it hasn't been put into a truly satisfying, proper plot, in my opinion. I like the movie. If it had a more satisfying ending, I probably would give it 8 out of 10. But with the slightly pointless ending that doesn't really satisfy, doesn't really explain much, and is just underwhelming, and as I say, sort of negates the whole entire 100 odd minutes we have just watched. What was the point of those 100 minutes? I mean, it was entertaining, 100 minutes of stuff happening, but it was fairly random scenes. So with that in mind, the ending not being quite up to snuff, I would give it 7 out of 10. And as far as it being a David Lynch style headfuck, does the movie make sense? Do I personally, as a viewer, understand the movie? I think I do understand it. I don't think there's really that much. You don't have to dig too far into it to understand what it's about. So I think I understand the movie. I don't think any of it's confusing to me, but of course, who knows, maybe I totally misunderstand the movie and it's a lot deeper and more intricate than I believe it to be.